From workflow to authority, what ServiceNow's Armis deal changes for CIOs and CISOs? ServiceNow on Tuesday announced that it would buy cybersecurity vendor Armis for $7.75 billion in cash. This builds on its December purchase of identity security vendor Visa and the closing of its acquisition of AI vendor Moveworks. Sanchit Gogia, the chief analyst at Greyhound Research, agreed that this acquisition will likely accelerate IT and security structural changes. This acquisition represents a fundamental repositioning of ServiceNow from a coordination layer into an operational authority. Buying Armis is not about expanding a security portfolio. It is about owning the upstream constraint that determines whether modern enterprises can govern complexity at all, Gogia said. But without knowing what is connected across IT, OT, IoT, and other physical environments, workflow automation, AI governance, and risk prioritization all collapse in a theater, he observed, adding that the deal could remove long-standing fragmentation between discovery tools, CMDBs, service mapping, ticketing, change management, and remediation. If executed well, it could finally address one of the enterprise's most persistent failures, he said. Gogia added, continuous discovery tied to business context has the potential to turn the CMDB from a negotiated artifact into a living system. That would change how incidents are resolved, how changes are governed, how audits are passed, and how accountability is assigned. The 2026 second half closing date implies a prolonged transition period where integration depth, roadmap clarity, and packaging decisions will evolve. CIOs should plan for ambiguity, not assume instant unification. Early value will come from visibility. Therefore, full platform value will take time, Gogia said. As quoted in CIO.com, in an article authored by Evan Schuman published on December 23, 2025. Beyond the media quote, our view in full. What does ServiceNow's acquisition of Armis change for enterprise CIOs? According to Greyhound Research, this acquisition represents a fundamental repositioning of ServiceNow from a coordination layer into an operational authority. Buying Armis is not about expanding a security portfolio. It is about owning the upstream constraint that determines whether modern enterprises can govern complexity at all. Asset truth. Without continuous, credible visibility into what is actually connected across IT, OT, IoT, medical, and cyber-physical environments, workflow automation, AI governance, and risk prioritization all collapse in a theater. Armis provides the missing reality layer. ServiceNow provides the execution layer. Together, they form a closed operational loop that shifts ServiceNow from routing work to defining reality. This move also reflects a recognition that asset visibility cannot remain a loosely coupled integration if ServiceNow intends to act as a control plane. Ownership matters because latency, friction, and ambiguity between discovery and action undermine governance at scale. By internalizing this layer, ServiceNow removes dependence on third-party cadence and aligns asset truth directly with platform execution logic. For CIOs, the opportunity is architectural rather than incremental. This deal offers a credible path to collapse long-standing fragmentation between discovery tools, CMDBs, service mapping, ticketing, change management, and remediation. If executed well, it could finally address one of the enterprise's most persistent failures, the CMDB that reflects aspiration rather than truth. Continuous discovery tied to business context has the potential to turn the CMDB from a negotiated artifact into a living system. That would change how incidents are resolved, how changes are governed, how audits are passed, and how accountability is assigned. This also reframes the CMDB from a passive reference to an active governance surface. If discovery continuously reconciles declared state with observed state, discrepancies become operational signals rather than audit findings. That shifts how CIOs must think about ownership, stewardship, and remediation responsibility across the organization. But this same consolidation introduces a structural trade-off that CIOs must confront explicitly. Platform gravity increases. Data gravity increases. Exit costs increase. When asset intelligence, exposure prioritization, and remediation logic are embedded into the same platform, ServiceNow ceases to be optional infrastructure. It becomes part of the enterprise operating system. That shifts procurement dynamics, negotiation leverage, and long-term architectural flexibility. CIOs should expect stronger bundling pressure, tighter commercial packaging, and more aggressive monetization precisely because the capability is strategically central. The scale and pricing of this acquisition also signal that ServiceNow will be under pressure to demonstrate return on invested capital. Historically, That pressure tends to translate into faster platform consolidation inside customer accounts, not slower. CIOs should therefore expect increased urgency around standardization decisions and should prepare governance mechanisms that prevent momentum from dictating architecture. This deal also quietly reframes ServiceNow's competitive set. It is no longer just competing with IT SIM or workflow platforms. It is encroaching on territory historically owned by infrastructure discovery, OT security, network visibility, and even elements of cloud management. That expands its relevance, but also increases internal friction. Facilities teams, operations leaders, and industrial engineers will now find their environments visible and governable through a central platform. The resulting organizational politics are not a side effect. They are part of the cost of consolidation. This competitive expansion also means CIOs will face new internal buying tensions. Decisions that were once departmental will increasingly require enterprise-level arbitration. The control plane conversation inevitably becomes a power conversation, and CIOs must be prepared to mediate it deliberately. Timing matters as well. This is a large, all-cash acquisition funded through cash and debt, expected to close only in the second half of 2026 subject to regulatory approval. That implies a prolonged transition period where integration depth, roadmap clarity, and packaging decisions will evolve. CIOs should plan for ambiguity, not assume instant unification. Early value will come from visibility. Full platform value will take time. During this transition period, communication and expectation management become operational risks in their own right. CIOs should plan for a phase where discovery improves faster than remediation maturity, and ensure teams are not overwhelmed by insight they are not yet equipped to act upon. There is also an accountability shift embedded in this deal. Once continuous discovery and prioritization exist, the defense of incomplete visibility disappears. When failures occur, the question will no longer be whether the organization knew. It will be why it did not act. That raises the bar for CIO governance, especially in regulated and safety-critical industries. The correct CIO response is not enthusiasm or resistance. It is deliberate engagement. Demand explicit commitments on data portability, integration openness, and boundary control. Decide consciously which domains should be centralized and which should remain federated. And most importantly, bring IT, security, OT, and risk into a single operating conversation. Because the failure mode here is not technological. It is organizational. Visibility without operational readiness creates noise. Noise creates risk. What does ServiceNow's acquisition of Armis change for enterprise CISOs and CSOs? According to Greyhound research, this acquisition shifts security from a detection discipline to an execution discipline. Armis has long been valuable because it exposes what traditional tools miss. Unmanaged devices, shadow systems, cyber-physical assets, and operational technologies that quietly dominate the real attack surface. What changes now is that discovery no longer stops at awareness. It can be directly bound to prioritization, workflow, and remediation at scale. ServiceNow is buying Armis to own that execution loop. This also reflects a broader shift in how security value is measured. Visibility without action no longer satisfies boards or regulators. Security programs are increasingly judged on whether exposure is reduced in measurable timeframes, not whether risks are merely identified. For CISOs and CSOs, this compresses the distance between intent and consequence. Security findings no longer need to traverse dashboards, handoffs, and manual approvals before action occurs. They can flow directly into operational systems that change live environments. That can materially reduce exposure, but it also increases the blast radius of mistakes. Governance maturity becomes the deciding factor between risk reduction and operational disruption. This compression removes traditional organizational buffers that once absorbed error. When security can trigger action directly, mistakes become immediately visible and politically costly. CISOs must therefore assume that influence and accountability will rise together. The most underappreciated risk here is over-automation, particularly in cyber-physical, industrial, healthcare, and safety-critical environments. Automation that is acceptable in enterprise IT can be dangerous when applied to production lines, medical networks, building systems, or industrial control environments. Availability and safety often outweigh confidentiality and speed. A platform that does not respect that hierarchy will fail regardless of how advanced it is. This forces CISOs into a new role, not just as defenders, but as governors of automated power. They must define where automation is permitted, where it is advisory, where human approval is mandatory, and how exceptions are handled. If those policies do not exist before adoption, the platform will enforce defaults that may not align with business reality. The correct adoption model is phased. Continuous discovery first. Contextual prioritization second. Workflow-based remediation with approval gates next. Limited autonomy only in low-risk segments. Any organization that jumps straight to full automation will learn through disruption. This phase model is not optional. It is a prerequisite for trust. Enterprises that treat automation as a switch rather than a spectrum will experience operational pushback that undermines security credibility. There's also a political shift inside enterprises that CISOs must anticipate. The ability to trigger action will increase security's influence, but it will also increase scrutiny. When automation causes disruption, security will be held directly accountable. This will strain already fragile trust between security teams and operations, engineering, and clinical stakeholders unless governance is explicit and collaborative. The integration timeline matters here too. With closing expected in the second half of 2026, CISOs should expect a period where interoperability, roadmap clarity, and platform boundaries are in flux. During this period, it is critical to press for transparency. What remains open? What becomes native? What integration commitments persist with other security platforms? A security program cannot afford silent consolidation that reduces flexibility without consent. This period of uncertainty also increases vendor risk exposure. CISOs should assume that platform decisions made during transition phases tend to become permanent, even if framed as interim. There is also a deeper risk that must be acknowledged. When exposure intelligence, asset data, and remediation workflows converge into one platform, that platform itself becomes a Tier 1 security dependency. Outages, access failures, misconfigurations, or insider risk within the platform can have systemic impact. CISOs must therefore elevate vendor resilience, access governance, auditability, and contingency planning for ServiceNow to the same level as other critical infrastructure. Finally, the scale of this deal signals intent. ServiceNow is positioning security as a primary growth engine. That means more aggressive roadmaps, tighter coupling, and stronger commercial pressure. CISOs must respond with equally strong procurement discipline, outcome-based validation, and governance oversight. As security becomes more central to platform monetization, CISOs should expect increased executive attention, faster sales cycles, and stronger expectations around measurable outcomes. That attention is an opportunity only if governance maturity keeps pace. The Monday morning action for CISOs is not to evaluate a product. It is to audit readiness, where unmanaged assets truly exist. Whether operational teams can absorb automated security action without breaking production. Whether autonomy policies exist at all. If those answers are unclear, this acquisition is not an upgrade opportunity. It is a warning, because the next phase of security is not about seeing more. It is about acting safely, deliberately, and with accountability. Analyst in focus, Sanchit Gogia. Sanchit Gogia, or SVG as he is popularly known, is a globally recognized technology analyst, innovation strategist, digital consultant, and board advisor. SVG is the chief analyst, founder and CEO of Greyhound Research, a global, award-winning technology research, advisory, consulting, and education firm. Greyhound Research works closely with global organizations, their CXOs, and the board of directors on technology and digital transformation decisions. SVG is also the founder and CEO of the House of Greyhound, an eclectic venture focusing on interdisciplinary innovation. Copyright policy. All content contained on the Greyhound Research website is protected by copyright law and may not be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, published, or broadcast without the prior written permission of Greyhound Research, or, in the case of third-party materials, the prior written consent of the copyright owner of that content. You may not alter, delete, obscure, or conceal any trademark, copyright, or other notice appearing in any Greyhound Research content. We request our readers not to copy Greyhound Research content and not republish or redistribute them, in whole or partially, via emails or republishing them in any media, including websites, newsletters, or intranets. We understand that you may want to share this content with others, so we've added tools under each content piece that allow you to share the content. If you have any questions, please get in touch with our community relations team at connect@thoffer.com.